Hey everyone, I'm back with another Frosthaven Digital video. Today we'll be talking and sort of summarizing really what we learned from my Q&A and live co-op playthrough session with the developers of the game Snapshot Games. They were kind enough to jump on stream with me for a few hours. We played through a few scenarios and we took Q&A really from the chat. So a lot of great information came up, stuff that I think has been lost maybe or not spoken about before. So hopefully this will give you a really good understanding of the direction of the game going forward and some real key points here that I think are actually game changers for us. So first off, let's talk about the release schedule in terms of content during early access. The devs said that they intend for the game to be in early access for about a year and that every 3 months they want to release something meaningful in terms of content. So that will be some new classes, some new scenarios, potentially maybe some other mechanics. You know, we're going to keep this very spoiler light, but potentially some other mechanics that come a little bit later in the game and progressing that story in some way. They're also planning to do regular updates just for kind of quality of life stuff, bug fixes and things like that. So they're not going to be holding themselves to only doing patches every 3 months, but it will be kind of a meaningful patch every 3 months in terms of content if that's what you are interested in. Also, their plan is to make the saves to be completely compatible throughout the early access period. So if you have managed to progress through in your campaign to the point where you already would have unlocked something that they're now adding to the game, it will automatically be unlocked and you won't kind of ruin your save or need to redo your save when that content gets added, which I think is super nice, especially considering the amount of time it's going to take to play through this campaign. You probably don't want to have to be restarting. They also said that that is their intention as well for when the game goes to the full 1.0 full launch version. They're going to try and preserve people's saves throughout the entire period, which is a really classy move. Obviously, they can't guarantee that because, you know, games change and then something might happen in the code or something but it can't happen, but their intentions are good and that they do want to try and do that for everyone. Another very common question is, will the game be coming to consoles and Mac? And unfortunately, there are no current plans for that to be the case. They are not ruling it out, and they're certainly looking at maybe controller support for PC. So, you know, once the controller support gets implemented, things like that might become a little bit easier, potentially. But they are not confirming anything at this stage. They're really just focusing on the Steam version, the early access version on there to try and get it as best as it could be. But of course, they're never going to rule that out. Also, to briefly touch on some quite exciting news, or well, I guess it's more of a, I don't know if you can really classify it as news because it's not official in any way. But in terms of when the game is finished, we did speak a little bit about Gloomhaven's 2nd edition characters and also about the Jaws of the Lion characters. And the devs are open and they do say that that stuff is on the table for future add-on packs potentially. So in terms of maybe DLC later down the line, then that could happen. Obviously, a lot of these things are tied to the success of the game, how well it gets implemented. There are loads of other factors as to if a DLC comes out for a game. But the fact that, you know, it's possible that we could be playing the Gloomhaven's 2nd edition versions of the characters in Frosthaven, be able to do that, that's really cool. They've also mentioned that potentially there might be some more modes coming to the game, or they would be looking at different modes of play as well. Kind of think about Guildmaster mode, but maybe a bit different, maybe their own spin on something like that. That kind of vibe. I know in Gloomhaven Digital we had that Guildmaster mode very early because they kind of made the game backwards, where they made the Guildmaster mode first while they were building the campaign to just kind of get the game up and running and get the framework going. Obviously, they're not needing to do that so much here, so they're focusing very much on the campaign to begin with. But they haven't ruled that out, so potentially after the full launch, we may get more options and more replayability in other different modes as well. Of course, also there are the solo scenarios, which Gloomhaven Digital did as a DLC, a little add-on pack, and that would be a very simple thing to add here. They said that that would also be something that they'd be very interested in. Sad to say, though, that Forgotten Circles is very much still the black sheep of the Haven family. That expansion is getting no love, and that class is getting no love either by the sounds of it. The actual scenarios inside Frosthaven that would require that character have actually been removed from digital entirely. So I don't think we're going to be ever seeing anything to do with that ever again. Who knows? Perhaps there might be a big rework at some point. I know a lot of people do like the Diviner. That class is interesting and a lot of people do enjoy it, although it had some issues with the first printing. They kind of rectified it a little bit with future printings and errata and stuff. Yeah, I just wouldn't hold your breath on that one. I don't think we're ever going to see it. So unfortunately, Forgotten Circles is really going to be one of those maybe tabletop only factors from Gloomhaven. The puzzle book is a bit of a divisive thing from Frosthaven, the physical version. I personally didn't jive with it particularly, mostly because I was playing solo, so I kind of had to rely on just myself. I didn't have other people or smarter people in the room than me to help me try and solve the puzzles. Also, it locked progression towards the actual main story. So if you didn't do it, you were kind of stuck, which I think was yeah, I don't really agree with that move. I think in terms of going forward, I think they might have also had that feedback from a lot of players, to be honest. So the puzzle book is something that they are looking to bring to Frosthaven Digital. It won't be in during the early access sort of first launch. So the first version that comes out on the 31st of July, that won't include anything to do with the puzzle book. But because it does add to the story and it is kind of like part of the story and the Frosthaven story, they want to tell that in its entirety, they will need to include it in some way. But again, they also reiterated that they weren't a huge fan of the decision to lock the progression behind the puzzle book. So I think we will definitely see it in some regard, but it might be like extra flavor or it might be something else. I don't know entirely, but yeah, expect to see it in some form, but it certainly won't be the same as it was in physical. There are also some late game buildings with some interesting interactions, I'll say, between the players potentially. That kind of stuff probably isn't going to kind of go into the game because it's just not practical. It's not really going to work in a digital environment. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. So I think it's fair to say that we won't see that, or it will be drastically reworked. They also said that most buildings will be available at the beginning of early access and will be buildable and mostly upgradable. Some of those buildings won't be fully upgradable just because of what they do at those fully upgraded states. And some buildings, such as the town hall, will be missing for probably obvious reasons if you've played the game. So now onto some more nuts and bolts gameplay stuff. And we learned, hallelujah, that there is going to be a undo function in the game. This means that you can undo just those little actions that you've done instead of having to restart a whole turn. This was a big thing in Gloomhaven Digital where everyone wanted it and it was really hard to do because of lots of different reasons, and they never managed to kind of get it. So we always had a half measure, which was that you could kind of restart the round, right? That would allow you to at least do that if you made a mistake. Now, if you make a misclick, you will have an undo button for that, which I think is just brilliant. And it will work across multiplayer as well as single player. So that's a huge step, I think, and a feature, as simple as it sounds, but it is a feature that we have been calling for a long time. So that is great. We also will have a speed up animations button that will be available. This is something that wasn't in my early preview, and Gloomhaven did have that option, so I'm glad to see that option kind of carried forward. But you will have a 5 times, a 3 times, and a 1 times. At least that's what we've seen so far. And that will allow you to speed up those animations so you can get the game going quicker. This is particularly really useful if you are facing like a huge scenario where there's loads of enemies and they're potentially just all doing the same action, which is something very boring, like just shielding or something like that in place. And you don't have to wait for all of those animations to play through to play. So a really nice quality of life addition. So it's good to see it here again. And something that I didn't think that they were going to really budge on here, because well, I thought, as I said in my preview video, they're going to lean much more into this being a video game and a fast, quick to play video game, and not necessarily bogging it down with some of the board game sort of things that are there that need to be there for the game to work. And that is monster ambiguity. So when we talk about this, this is when a monster could move to either Hex A or Hex B. Each one is perfectly viable and in the rules of the game. In the physical game, because there's no computer there, the players get to decide. And the reason why this is important is a lot of the classes in Frosthaven, they kind of prey on enemies being in certain patterns or moving onto certain hexes in certain arrangements. I'm not going to spoil anything, but a lot of classes really do depend on you having that little bit of a say in those 50-50 scenarios where the enemy can go, because that can be the difference between a player having a really great turn and a not so good turn, right? And the Banner Spear, even from the starting classes, is a good example of one that could benefit slightly from this, because if they can get that enemy into that exact hex that they want that lines up with their pattern, they can then do their big attack, right? Or their big action. So I think that this was something that I wasn't sure whether or not they were actually going to put this into the game. And they have said that they are looking at this as an option. So this would be something you need to toggle on in the options. If you do that, then obviously you will be able to do it. It probably won't be on by default, I would think, but it is something that they are looking into. Now, it won't be there during the initial early access launch. So temper your expectations for now, because they just very much have engaged with the conversation on this and have said, yep, we understand the reason why players want it. We understand the importance of it. So they get that. So they are now looking at real options to be able to do that. And they are committed to really exploring those options. So that, I think, is big news, really, to a lot of people who potentially might have even just swore off this game because they didn't want to play their favorite class without being able to maybe have that ambiguity choice to really make it shine, you know? So that, I think, is quite big news. And it was something that I think a lot of people were kind of waiting to hear and see. So I'm really excited about that. And certainly it will be an option that I will be playing with certain classes, not with every class, but with certain classes in my party, I will definitely be toggling that on if the ability to do so is there. Short resting is something that players have been giving their feedback on because there have been some changes to the way it works in Frosthaven Digital. Short resting happens at the beginning of your turn. So at the beginning of each round, when choosing cards, you choose to short rest. Then you essentially reveal cards and then you go and do your short rest is kind of how it works. And at the moment, it is not simultaneous between players. So there is a little bit of a delay where you have to wait for a player to do it. Then the next player has to do it. Then they have to go and pick their cards again. So those particular turns can be a little bit long sometimes. And I think that's kind of the general feeling. Unfortunately, the devs sort of said that really because of the amount of effects that can trigger in a short rest, because of the complexity of some of the classes and some of the extra stuff in the game. You know, I'm not going to spoil loads of stuff, but yeah, I agree with them here. There are a lot of things that can happen in a short rest. Things like masteries can be triggered off of it, stuff like that. There's lots of things going on, so I can see why it can be a very tricky thing to do. It might seem simple, but not. So if you're playing a multiplayer game, they said unfortunately they don't really see a path forward right now so that they could be simultaneous without severely breaking the game and making it kind of a worse experience than it currently is. However, if you are playing solo, they have accepted and said, yeah, we could make that simultaneous. So if you're playing solo on your own, then it can be a simultaneous thing. So that's something to also look forward to if you're playing solo. But if you are playing multiplayer, unfortunately, it looks like that system is probably here to stay and is necessary. So those were the highlight questions and answers really from that stream, although they did answer a lot more and a lot more kind of nitty gritty little things. So I do really encourage you to watch the VOD. It is now up on my channel. I'll put a link down in the description to this video and in the pinned comment if you'd like to watch the full stream all the way through. Watch some co-op gameplay action as well, so you get a sense of what the game is like to play together. And yeah, I'm super excited for this early access launch. I think it's great that the devs are being so responsive and they're talking to the community, working with the community. And I'm definitely getting that sense that they've got a real passion for just Frosthaven, the game. And so they, similar to what happened with Gloomhaven Digital, where I got that sense too, where they're certainly going to do everything within their power and they're going to jump through those hoops to try and make it the best experience that it can be. And that's because they love the game, and that's because they want everybody else to love the game as well. So I think that is an incredible lucky thing that we seem to have struck gold maybe twice as Haven fans with a development team. But yeah, super excited to check out this game when it comes to early access on the 31st of July. And I will be live streaming the game, so make sure you go to my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/ManageRequests. I'll be streaming on the 31st when the game comes out, but also obviously in the days after that, as well as we kind of play through some of the content that's there. And I kick off, I don't know if I'll kick off my full playthrough on that date, because I kind of want to do a fresh playthrough when the game is like fully there, but we're certainly going to be playing through all of the content there, messing around with the characters that are there as well. So 100% it's going to be a lovely time. I will hopefully see you on a live stream or not in the next video. Thanks a lot so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Bye.